Welcome back to LearnXYZ channel. Today we're diving deep into something pretty serious. Guillain-Barré Syndrome, or GBS for short. And I have to say, even just glancing over all the articles and research you sent me, this condition sounds really, really scary.
It can be, yeah.
So,
Guillain-Barré syndrome is a rare disorder where your own immune system, the one that's supposed to protect you, it ends up attacking your nerves.
wow, so it's not like a virus or bacteria that's attacking your nerves directly. This is your own body
Your own body.
doing the damage.
That's right. The immune system, it gets confused and it mistakes parts of your nerves for harmful invaders. And because of that, the nerves can't send signals properly throughout your body.
Okay, that explains why one of the main symptoms I'm seeing here is muscle weakness. I've got an article here mentioning people having trouble even trouble breathing in severe cases.
Exactly. And it's not just weakness. People with GBS can experience numbness, tingling, like that pins and needles feeling, and even muscle pain.
That sounds awful.
Yeah.
And what's even more unsettling is that it seems like this can happen to anyone, right? It doesn't only affect people with pre-existing conditions or anything like that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that makes GBS so concerning. It can strike anyone, really, although it is more common in adults and those over 50.
So there I am, just going about my day, and suddenly my own body starts attacking my nerves. What on earth triggers that?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. In most cases, GBS, it seems to be triggered by an infection, so your body fights off the infection, but then the immune system kind of goes a bit haywire and starts targeting the nerves.
I see we have information here about a few different infections that have been linked to GBS. Campylobacter pneumoniae, which I know can cause food poisoning, seems to be a pretty frequent culprit.
Yeah.
But then there are viruses too, like Zika, dengue, even the flu and COVID-19.
It's a pretty diverse list. It makes you wonder what the common link could be, but researchers believe that certain proteins in these viruses and bacteria might resemble those found in our myelin.
Now, I remember from when we were prepping for this that myelin is absolutely crucial for nerve function, right?
Yes.
But can you remind me and our listeners exactly what it does?
Okay, so imagine the wiring in your house, right? Myelin is like that insulation around the wires. It allows those electrical signals to travel quickly and efficiently. And in your body, those electrical signals are nerve impulses. So when that myelin gets damaged, those signals get disrupted, and that leads to the symptoms of GBS.
So it's like the insulation is all frayed and the signal gets weaker or lost completely.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. But here's what I'm tripping up on. I'm seeing from these sources that there are several different types of GBS.
Right.
Why is that?
That's a great question. So while most types of GBS, they attack the myelin, like we were just talking about,
Yeah.
there's actually a type that goes after the actual wire itself, the axon. Imagine the severity of that.
Oh, wow.
Then you have other types that target specific parts of the nervous system. So, for example, Miller-Fisher syndrome or MFS affects the cranial nerves, which control things like your eye movement and coordination.
Wait, so with one type you might have trouble walking, but with another type you might have trouble seeing or keeping your balance.
Exactly.
That's a huge difference.
Huge difference. And this really highlights why diagnosing GBS can be so tricky. The symptoms can vary so much and can even mimic other conditions.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do doctors even figure out if someone actually has GBS, especially since it's so rare?
Well, they have to play detective.
Right.
They'll start by taking a very detailed medical history, and they'll do a physical exam.
Right.
They'll check your reflexes, muscle strength, look for any sensory changes like numbness or tingling.
So they're gathering clues to see if the symptoms really point to GBS?
Exactly. Then they can do some more specific tests.
Oh, okay.
One is a lumbar puncture, also known as a spinal tap, where they'll take a sample of your cerebrospinal fluid from your lower back.
Yeah.
And in GBS, this fluid often has elevated protein levels,
Interesting.
which can be a key indicator.
Okay. And then there's that nerve conduction velocity test, the NCV. I remember seeing that back.
Right, the NCV that measures how fast the electrical signals travel through your nerves. And in GBS, because of that damage to the myelin or the axon, those signals travel much slower than they should.
So they're basically timing the nerve signals to see if there's a delay.
Exactly.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Okay, but let's get to the big question that I think is on everyone's mind.
Yeah.
Is there a cure for GBS?
Unfortunately, there's no cure yet, but that doesn't mean there's no hope. There are treatments that can significantly improve symptoms, reduce the severity of the illness, and even shorten that recovery time.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. So what kinds of treatments are we talking about?
So there are two main approaches that doctors use, and they both aim to calm down that overactive immune system.
Okay.
One is plasma exchange, which is kind of like a blood filtering process.
Okay.
They remove some of your blood, separate out the plasma, which contains those harmful antibodies,
Right.
and then they return your blood cells along with a replacement fluid.
So it's kind of like removing the bad guys from the battlefield.
That's a good way to put it. The other treatment is intravenous immunoglobulin therapy, or IVIG for short. And here they give you healthy antibodies from donors, which can help fight the inflammation and lessen that immune attack on your nerves.
So both treatments are basically about giving your immune system a bit of a reset.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And both are most effective when they're started early on, ideally within 2 weeks of those first symptoms appearing.
So early diagnosis is crucial then.
Absolutely.
But what happens if someone doesn't get diagnosed right away, or if the treatments aren't fully effective? What's the long-term outlook for someone with GBS?
That's where things get a little more complicated. The recovery process can be a long road, and it really is different for everyone. We'll get into more detail on that in a bit.
Okay, so stay tuned for part 2, everyone, because we're going to explore that recovery process and what life after GBS can look like.
Definitely.
But before we move on, I did want to touch on something that really struck me in the articles you sent. There was this outbreak of GBS in Pune, India, with over 50 cases linked to dengue and Zika virus infections. Right. That seems like a lot for such a rare disorder.
It is concerning, and it really highlights that connection between these infections and GBS.
Yeah.
This outbreak also brings to light the importance of public health measures, things like mosquito control and vaccination programs in preventing the spread of these viruses.
It's like a domino effect. One infection can lead to another even more serious condition.
Yeah.
So even though GBS is rare, this outbreak shows that it can have a significant impact on a community.
Absolutely. And it really underscores the importance of awareness. You know, the more people know about GBS, its symptoms and the potential triggers, the better equipped we are to recognize it early and seek timely medical attention.
That's a powerful point. So everyone listening, if you've recently had an infection and you start experiencing any unusual weakness, numbness, tingling, please don't hesitate to see a doctor.
Yeah.
It's always better to be safe than sorry.
I completely agree. Early intervention is key to improving outcomes for GBS.
This is all such important information, but before we get ahead of ourselves, let's take a step back and kind of delve a little deeper into how GBS actually affects the body. Because I think understanding what's happening on a physiological level can really help us appreciate the severity of this condition and the importance of this early diagnosis and treatment.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the nervous system, you know, the command center of our body, and how GBS disrupts its very delicate balance.
Let's do it.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Guillain-Barré Syndrome. You know, before the break, we were talking about how GBS can manifest in a variety of ways, affecting different parts of the nervous system.
Yeah, it's just mind-blowing to me how something like the flu or food poisoning could set off this whole chain reaction in your body and lead to these really serious complications.
It is a bit like a domino effect, isn't it? And to really understand that domino effect, I think we need to take a closer look at the nervous system itself.
Okay, so back to school for a quick anatomy lesson.
Exactly. So think of your nervous system as this vast communication network constantly sending signals throughout your body.
Okay.
You have your central nervous system, which is like the main headquarters, your brain and spinal cord.
Right.
And then you have your peripheral nervous system, which is like that network of cables carrying those signals from headquarters to the rest of your body, your muscles, your organs, everything.
So it's like the central nervous system is the CEO giving orders.
Yeah.
And the peripheral nervous system is the team carrying out those orders.
A great analogy. And GBS primarily attacks the peripheral nervous system, disrupting that flow of communication between your brain and your muscles.
So if those signals are disrupted, the muscles don't get the message to move properly, which leads to that weakness we were talking about.
Exactly. Now, let's zoom in even further. Remember myelin, that insulation around those nerve fibers?
Yes.
Well, within the peripheral nervous system, you also have these long, slender fibers called axons, which are like the actual wires carrying the electrical signals.
Right. And you mentioned earlier that some types of GBS attack the myelin, while others go after the axon itself.
Precisely.
Much more severe.
Much more severe. And to make things even more complex, there's this whole other part of the nervous system that can be affected in GBS, the autonomic nervous system.
Okay, now I'm lost.
Yeah.
What's the autonomic nervous system?
So the autonomic nervous system, that's the system that runs things in the background without you even thinking about it. Things like your breathing, your heart rate, blood pressure, digestion, all that good stuff.
So basically autopilot for your body.
Exactly. And in some cases of GBS, this autopilot system gets disrupted.
Oh, no.
which can lead to some pretty life-threatening complications.
That's scary. So you could have problems breathing, heart rate fluctuations,
Yeah.
even digestive issues, all because your immune system is attacking your nerves.
That's why it's so crucial to catch GBS early and start treatment as soon as possible. The earlier you intervene, the less chance there is for those serious complications.
Okay, that makes sense. But I have another question about the autonomic nervous system. I remember reading that it also plays a role in our fight or flight response. You know, that surge of adrenaline when we're faced with danger. So if someone with GBS has autonomic dysfunction, could that mess with their ability to respond to stress?
That's a really interesting question, and it highlights just how complex GBS is. While we don't have all the answers yet, it's certainly possible that autonomic dysfunction could impact someone's stress response.
Right.
After all, if the nervous system isn't communicating properly, that could affect all sorts of bodily functions, including our response to stress.
It's fascinating, but also kind of terrifying how interconnected everything is in our bodies. It makes you really appreciate how delicate this balance is.
It really does, and it underscores why research into GBS is so important. The more we understand about how this condition works, the better we can diagnose it, treat it, and hopefully even prevent it in the future.
Speaking of research, let's shift gears a bit and dive into that world. I'm really eager to learn about the latest discoveries and what hope they hold for people with GBS.
Absolutely. There's a lot of groundbreaking research happening right now, and it's really remarkable what scientists are uncovering.
One area that really stood out to me in the articles you sent was the research on the role of genetics in GBS.
Yeah.
So is there a possibility that some people are predisposed to this condition?
That's a question researchers are actively exploring. While GBS isn't directly inherited like some other diseases, studies are finding that variations in certain genes, particularly those involved in the immune system, might make some individuals more susceptible.
So it's like having a slightly different blueprint for your immune system, one that might make it more likely to overreact and trigger an attack on your own nerves.
Exactly. Imagine your immune system as a security system. Some people might have a security system that's a bit too sensitive, going off at the slightest provocation.
Right.
And in the case of GBS, that provocation might be a seemingly harmless infection.
That makes sense. And identifying those genetic factors could help us understand who's at higher risk and potentially even personalize their health care.
Right? Absolutely. It's all about moving towards more personalized medicine, tailoring treatments to an individual's specific needs and genetic makeup.
That's incredible what other areas of research are showing promise.
Well, as we discussed earlier, inflammation is a key player in GBS, and researchers are looking for ways to reduce that inflammation more effectively to really calm down that overzealous immune response.
So it's about putting out the fire that's damaging the nerves.
Exactly. One promising avenue involves a new treatment that has been shown to reduce inflammation caused by certain immune cells called macrophages in the nerves of animal models.
Now remind me, what are macrophages again?
Think of them as the cleanup crew of your immune system. They engulf and destroy invaders, but in GBS they get a bit overzealous and end up causing more damage than good. This new treatment aims to calm those macrophages down, preventing them from doing further harm.
So it's like setting in a peacekeeping force to de-escalate the situation.
I love that analogy. And if this treatment proves successful in humans, it could be another powerful tool in our arsenal against GBS.
This is also encouraging, but I also want to know more about how researchers study GBS in the first place. Some of the techniques they use sound pretty complex.
They can be, but they're essential for unraveling the mysteries of this condition.
Right.
One method that's been instrumental is the use of animal models, specifically mice.
Okay.
Scientists have developed a mouse model with an altered gene that causes autoimmunity against the peripheral nervous system, essentially mice that mimic GBS in humans.
So they've created mice that have the same immune system dysfunction as people with GBS. That's amazing.
It is, and by studying these mice, they can observe how the disease progresses, test potential treatments, and gain insights that wouldn't be possible in human studies.
It's like having a window into the intricate workings of the nervous system and the immune system's role in GBS.
Precisely, and with these animal models, scientists are making strides in identifying the specific proteins in the peripheral nervous system that are most vulnerable to autoimmune attack.
Wow.
It's all about pinpointing the precise targets of the immune system's friendly fire.
This research is so critical for developing more effective treatments and hopefully one day even a cure for GBS.
Yeah.
But while we wait for those breakthroughs, what can people who are currently living with GBS do to manage their condition and improve their quality of life?
That's a great question, and it brings us to a really crucial aspect of our deep dive: the recovery process, and what life looks like after a GBS diagnosis.
Let's dive into that because as fascinating as all the science is, it's the personal stories and the resilience of those living with GBS that truly inspire us.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've covered so much ground, from the causes and symptoms of GBS to the amazing research that's giving us so much hope for the future.
Yeah.
But now I think it's time to talk about what happens after that GBS diagnosis.
What's that recovery process like, and what kind of challenges do people actually face?
Yeah, recovery from GBS, it can be a long and winding road, and it's really different for everyone. Some people, they recover relatively quickly, while others experience a much slower, more gradual return to, their previous level of functioning.
Yeah, I'm looking at some personal stories here from people who have had GBS, and one of the biggest challenges seems to be just the uncertainty of it all, not knowing how long it will take to recover or if they'll ever fully regain their strength and mobility.
That's a huge part of it. GBS can be a very isolating and emotionally draining experience. You go from feeling perfectly healthy one day to suddenly facing weakness, numbness, even paralysis in some cases. It can be a real shock to the system, both physically and mentally.
I can only imagine. So what factors actually influence how quickly someone recovers from GBS?
Well, several things play a role. The severity of the initial attack is definitely a factor. The more severe the symptoms are, the longer the recovery tends to take. A person's age and overall health also plays a role, as does how quickly they receive diagnosis and treatment.
That makes sense. The earlier you can calm down that overactive immune system, the less damage there is to the nerves, and the better the chances of a smoother recovery.
Absolutely.
But what about those long-term effects? We talked about how some people experience lingering weakness or fatigue even after they've technically recovered from GBS.
Right. It's important to remember that recovery isn't always complete. While the majority of people regain full or near full function, a small percentage do experience long-term effects.
Right.
Things like muscle weakness, fatigue, pain, or even difficulty with balance and coordination.
So even though the acute phase of GBS is over there, can be these kind of lingering challenges, what can people do to manage these long-term effects and improve their quality of life?
Physical therapy is often a cornerstone of recovery. It helps to rebuild strength, improve coordination, and regain mobility. Occupational therapy can also be very beneficial, teaching people how to adapt to any limitations they may have and regain independence in their daily activities.
It's amazing how the brain and body can adapt and relearn even after a setback like GBS.
It is.
But what about the emotional side of things? It seems like going through an experience like this would really take a toll on mental health.
It absolutely can. GBS can be a traumatic experience, both for the person going through it and for their loved ones. The sudden onset of symptoms, the fear of not knowing what's happening, the potential loss of independence, it can trigger anxiety, depression, and even post-traumatic stress disorder.
So addressing mental health is just as important as addressing physical health during recovery.
Absolutely.
What kind of support is available for people struggling with the emotional impact of GBS?
Counseling and support groups can be incredibly helpful. Talking to a therapist can provide a safe space to process, the emotional roller coaster of GBS, and connecting with others who've been through a similar experience can really foster a sense of community and shared understanding.
It's so powerful to know that you're not alone on this journey.
It is.
I'm also seeing some information here about complementary therapies, like yoga, meditation, acupuncture. Could those be helpful during recovery as well?
They certainly can be. While these therapies don't directly treat GBS, they can be very effective in managing stress, reducing anxiety, and improving overall well-being. Many people find that these practices really help them cope with both the emotional and physical challenges of GBS recovery.
It's like taking a holistic approach, addressing the physical, the emotional, even the spiritual aspects of healing.
Exactly.
But before we wrap up, I wanted to touch on something you mentioned earlier, the importance of research.
Yeah.
Are there any new developments on the horizon that could potentially change the way we treat or even prevent GBS?
There are several exciting areas of research that hold great promise for the future of GBS treatment and prevention. One promising avenue is the development of more targeted therapies that focus on specific parts of the immune system that are involved in attacking the nerves.
So instead of broadly suppressing the whole immune system, which can have all sorts of side effects, these new therapies would really zero in on the specific culprits that are causing the damage.
Exactly. And that could lead to more effective treatments with fewer side effects.
Wow.
Another area of research is exploring the role of the microbiome, the trillions of bacteria that live in our gut,
Oh, wow.
in triggering or modulating the immune response in GBS.
I never would have thought that gut bacteria could play a role in a neurological disorder.
It's a fascinating area of research, and early studies suggest that there may be a connection. If scientists can pinpoint the specific gut bacteria involved, it could open up new avenues for both prevention and treatment.
That's incredible. And I know we've talked a lot about the challenges of GDS today, but I think it's so important to end on a note of hope.
Yeah.
Even though there's no cure yet, there are effective treatments available, and research is constantly advancing, which gives us real reason to be optimistic about the future.
I agree. And beyond the treatments and the research, there's something incredibly powerful about the human spirit, the resilience, the strength, and the determination to overcome adversity.
Absolutely.
The stories we've read about people with GBS who have faced incredible challenges and yet found ways to adapt, to heal, and to live these full and meaningful lives, those stories are truly inspiring.
They really are, and they remind us that even in the face of a daunting diagnosis like GBS, there's always hope. So for anyone listening who is currently on their GBS journey, know that you are not alone. There are resources available. There are people who understand, and there is hope for a brighter future.
Well said. And for those who want to learn more about GBS, its treatments, and the latest research, I encourage you to visit www.LearnXYZ-In. It's a fantastic resource with a wealth of information.
That's right. And remember, knowledge is power. The more we understand about GBS, the better equipped we are to support those affected, to advocate for research, and ultimately find a cure for this challenging condition. Thank you for listening to the LearnXYZ channel. For more information on Guillain-Barré Syndrome, visit the incredible website www.LearnXYZ-In. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into fascinating topics.